This is the Financial Beat, helping you hit all the right notes in your financial plan. So sit back as we strike up the band. The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler starts now.
Welcome to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at Regary Financial. My name is Ron Stutz. Always a pleasure to hang out with Logan for an hour on this show. We're going to talk about getting you to and through retirement, everything having to do with your money and the financial side of things. And Logan, it's great to be back with you.
Yeah, great to be hanging out with you as well, Ron, for the next hour, and looking forward to a great show.
Got a lot of important things to talk about today, things that are in the news and that everybody is concerned about. But first, let me put your phone number out there. So important to remember this number, so please go ahead and write it down right off the bat here, 888-823-PLAN. That is 888-823-7526. But the easy way to remember it, 888-823-PLAN. That number will put you in touch with Logan Sadler. Leave a message today with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back, and then you can have a discovery meeting. And more on that a little bit later on. In the news lately, a lot of exciting things and a lot of disturbing things happening out there. And recently, when it comes to financial related news, what has really stuck out to you is something that we all need to be concerned about.
Yeah, you know, I always, when we talk about it in the news, I try to find something that's kind of relevant to everybody. And it was interesting. I was stumbling across, and I did find about the job claims. And so I did find that the U.S. job openings fell by more than 1% or by more than 1 million, in August. Mm-hmm. And I found that, you know, obviously looking at it, it sounds very alarming when you're looking at it from that point of view. But really, it's crazy because the U.S. labor market, it did show signs of slowing down in the month of August, but the number of job openings dropped to about 10.1 million from 11.2 million in July. Wow. So that's actually, you know, crazy because statistically, that's back to about June of 2021. Now, with that being said, I always say, you know, depending on how you read the news article, it can cause panic, right? Or it can cause you to think a little bit deeper. And when I look at that, it is crazy, Ron, because I think we all know either friends, family, or business owners, or maybe at our current job where we're still probably pretty short on staff, right? It is one of those things where I know in our industry, when I'm talking about either these large insurance companies or the brokerages or any of these type of firms out there, I know a lot of them are still hurting for people to come on board. So it is, you know, thinking back, yes, we are down relative to where we were a few months ago, but looking back, even 2021 was such a huge shortage. There was still a huge shortage of people out there looking for these, or a lot of positions open, I should say. Yeah. So just very interesting. I found that kind of something good to talk about because there's always a lot going on, and it seems like, you know, with everything going on in the world right now, it definitely seems like things are trying to slow down, but still there is several different, you know, indications out there that things are still somewhat strong in a lot of areas.
Well, something else that's been in the news a lot lately, and something that, there's not much reason to worry about hurricanes in California, but in other parts of the country, like Florida, for example, and, up and down the East Coast, particularly the southern areas, it was a huge hurricane recently, and that has caused all kinds of problems for folks, not just devastation, but also power outages and flooding and everything. Much of the East Coast has recently spent a lot of time watching the Weather Channel and getting a refresher on how hurricanes work. So I thought today on this show we could take the opportunity to see what we might be able to learn about retirement planning from a discussion about hurricanes. And again, a lot of people in California don't need to worry about hurricanes, but it's kind of indicative of what happens in the financial world sometimes. How about the eye wall replacement cycle? I've learned a little bit about that by watching the Weather Channel, as I mentioned.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I mean, definitely hearts go out to everybody out there that's been affected because, watching it across the country over here in California, obviously I actually have clients out in Florida and stuff as well, and all of the ones that we've talked to are all safe and everything is okay, but definitely has been some extreme devastation, I would say, in a lot of those areas out there. So definitely hearts go out to everybody that was affected by that because, as we know, that's not necessarily a fun thing to experience. No. But like you said, the eye wall of the storm is crazy because we've all heard of the eye of the storm, right? I mean, it's in movies and and on the news and all that stuff. So basically what that means is typically that means the hurricane winds that are closest to the center of the eye wall during the life cycle of those hurricanes, the inner winds can sometimes weaken as you get closer, right? So the eye of the storm is kind of like the calmer part, I would say, right? The process typically, though, around the exterior of the hurricane is typically closest to the eye is typically where the highest winds are. And its hurricane is typically, as it starts to kind of peel off, starts to kind of shed that weight, that dead weight, to allow it to become more intense and powerful as it replaces its eye wall. So, a lot of you guys didn't expect to get an in-depth view of a storm there, but, as always, we like to turn something that's, relative to everybody or something we all know about into financials. And when I look at retirement planning, in many ways, your retirement plan should work in a very similar manner where as you get older or closer to retirement, some of the investments that help build a big account balance for you are sometimes the same ones that might not be the best for you to create income in retirement. So at some point, you'll need to shed some of those investments and focus more on growth, or stop focusing on growth and shift those assets to maybe the preservation and income stage, to that way you can make your overall portfolio stronger. So, looking at some of those growth stocks that might have been a great spot for you, you might want to shift those into positions that might be a better income producing vehicle or a more of a diversified, way to make sure that we're preserving our wealth throughout times like right now where we're seeing a lot of volatility. So definitely could be important.
As you get closer to retirement, it requires a different mindset altogether, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Another thing that goes along with hurricanes that we were just talking about is power outages. I mean, there are lots of rain resulting in downed trees that fall across power lines and all that kind of thing. And a lot of people end up being without electricity for a good period of time. And how do you relate that to financial planning?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even people out here in California are pretty familiar with power outages, and we don't even have hurricanes, right? But definitely something that comes along with it. And anytime you're facing a big potential storm, you could cause, you could have the fear of probably having to go without power. And it's important to make sure that you're prepared. You might need, anybody that knows me and my family, they know that I love flashlights. I feel like you can't have enough of them because flashlights and candles, right? It's nice to be able to see at night if your power's out. But you got to make sure you have batteries. You got to make sure you have a way to keep your refrigerator cooled if you can, possibly a radio or some way to get updates on the news and what's going on with the storms, and maybe even some stuff so that way you can cook, maybe a gas grill or something of that sort. But, it's very similar to where if you're retiring soon, it means that your paychecks are about to experience a power outage, right? It means that all of a sudden you're going to go from making whatever it is, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever the amount is, to all of a sudden, okay, what am I going to do now to get the next paycheck, right? How am I going to switch my assets to where now they're producing maybe a monthly income? And that's something where you really need a plan to determine how you'll use your investments to create an income plan. A method that gives you, yourself really more of a way to kind of help produce that income, but also you want to look at things like raises. You want to look at things like inflation, that you're going to want income to go up at some point, as well as long-term care. All of those things we look at, as well as tax efficiency. So that's where I tell people a lot of the times, typically around that phase when you're getting closer to or approaching retirement, or maybe just starting retirement, it typically is times where things like maybe income producing REITs might be a good way to produce cash flow. There's annuities out there that have lifetime income on them. We're more of a fan sometimes of those fixed index annuities rather than the variable ones, but either way, some of those tend to have some pretty good cash flow on them. Some of them even have increasing cash flow, right? So that could be a really good time to where those might come in. You also have some different stocks that are less growth, but typically have more dividends. You got structured bank notes. You got a lot of that, as well as you want to look into how does that fit into your tax control, right? So you make sure before a storm comes or before you're getting ready to retire, you want to make sure you're kind of checking those boxes and making sure you're in a position where you're going to be able to produce that next paycheck.
You're listening to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, and we're talking a lot today about weather and, relating it to financial matters. And another thing that we've all become accustomed to is with any kind of a weather disaster, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or fires, extreme heat, whatever the case may be, we all are paying a lot of attention to meteorologists, and especially when there's some kind of an approaching storm, they're paying special attention to their computer models, and, it helps them do their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in anything nowadays, right? If we're saying that computers aren't going to be around, I think we were all wrong, right? So it's something where we're all using some form of technology and watching the hurricanes or storm watch. I know, Debbie here at our office, we always make fun of her because she's always got her Doppler on. She's always watching a storm come in, and of course in California it's typically just one little rain cloud coming by. But it is funny how we do use that, and it is funny when you're looking at retirement planning tools. There is a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of stuff you can do yourself. You can go online, do an online calculator, plug some stuff in, and it might give you an answer, as well as your advisor might be using one, or maybe you've talked about using one. But really what the importance part of that is, I think that a good advisor does more than just plug numbers into some fancy software and print out a big retirement report you probably can't read or don't understand a lot of the terms. It really takes time, I feel, to make sure that you're understanding what is important to you, and make sure that advisor is using their experience and creativity to put together a plan that makes sense for you. And I think that's a huge point when you're looking at those tools, because even here at our firm, I love some of these retirement analyzing tools and some of these investment tools. We can really take a deep dive and look at, tax implications, Roth conversions, safety, how maybe we can get more of a better risk tolerance and maybe get something more customized to what we're trying to do. And there's a lot of different systems that you could plug into some of these technologies, services that are, in my opinion, very crucial and can be a great component to a retirement plan. But I feel it's very important to make sure that you're working with somebody, or maybe have the knowledge yourself, to make sure that you're able to not only put together the plan, but now we got to make sure we have each of those products or services into that portfolio that we created in the plan. Now we got to make sure we have them, right? And a lot of the times you can't get some of that stuff on your own, like structured banknotes, annuities, life insurance products, a lot of that stuff, as well as some of the advanced metrics to some of the market holdings out there. So there's a lot more that goes into it, Ron, I feel, than just plugging some numbers into a computer and thinking, yeah, this looks like a pretty good retirement plan. Yep. You got to make sure you have the right person helping you put that together, and making sure you have the right tools and services in there to create that efficient retirement plan. So that is what we do. If you're one of those listeners out there that's maybe been listening to the show for a week, or maybe they've been listening to it for several weeks, and you're looking for somebody out there, maybe you're approaching retirement or getting close, or just started, and looking for someone to help put together a well-rounded retirement plan to get you to and through retirement, I think it's time you come in for that discovery meeting, and guarantee you'll leave with some education and some value.
Give Logan Sadler's office a call at 888-823-PLAN. That is 888-823-PLAN. You can set up a time to have that discovery meeting that we talk about so often here. It's so important. That initial conversation is not going to cost you anything and not going to obligate you to do anything at all beyond that. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call. Remember that Regari Financial has offices in Hemet and Redlands. Logan Sadler will talk to you at either of those places, but this will all start with a phone call, a conversation, a discovery meeting at no cost, no obligation, no strings attached, in other words. 888-823-PLAN. Logan Sadler will be back with more coming up in just a moment with more of the Financial Beat.
Did you know music is good for the heart? A study at a university in Italy showed that music helps promote a better cardiovascular system. But we also know that a sound financial plan is good for peace of mind. Keep listening to the Financial Beat so we can help you find a plan that both your head and your heart can agree on.
And the beat goes on. The Financial Beat we're talking about here. Logan Sadler, VP, Chief Investment Officer at Regari Financial, is on the radio every week with this show. Convenient offices in Hemet and Redlands. Logan would love to talk to you, and the number to call to make that happen to get a discovery meeting is 888-823-PLAN. That is 888-823-PLAN. Call that number right now. Leave a message with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back first part of the week, and then you can have your discovery meeting, no cost, no strings attached. 888-823-PLAN. Hey, Logan, a lot of people listen to this show every single week, but some folks we find are listening to your podcasts, and they can do that anytime. How do you get to those?
Yeah, that's funny. Like you said, a lot of people I've been meeting with have been listening to the podcast. And how you do that is you head over to wherever you download podcasts. That could be Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, and you type in The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. And there's over 70 episodes now recorded and uploaded on there, and they're uploaded weekly. So if you missed this week's show, you can head over there and catch it, or even look at some of our older catalogs of shows on there at your convenience, whether it's in the car, at the gym, wherever you're at, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you could do so. Again, type in The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler.
Yeah, lots of good, helpful information on there, and it's amazing. Some people listen to these things at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's there for you. Hey, got a quote of the week here for you from Sally Poplin. I don't know who Sally Poplin is or was, but one time she said, some couples go over their budgets very carefully every month. Others just go over them. What does she mean by that?
I definitely get what she's saying there, right? Some of us carefully comb through our budget and see where money is going and go over them, meaning, assess the budget. And others just go over them, meaning that they don't have a budget. They just overspend every time they even set a budget, right? So definitely have seen that in our years here, and even with family or personal friends will ask me about things. And it is funny because we are all the same. Some of us are very, very structured and like budgets and will stick to them, and other ones like to structure a budget to break them, right? Just like a diet, right?
Yeah. As Sly and the Family Stone once said, different strokes for different folks.
Yep.
We are the same, whatever we do, with
Yes.
some differences in the way we look at things. While we're talking about debt here, let's talk about handling debt. Tell us about a client of yours at Regari Financial who was able to create substantial wealth because they did not have any debt.
Yeah, what's funny is I had one client, more than one in this instance, but in this specific story, it was actually a guy who he worked for the phone company. They make good money. Again, not multi-millions or like that, but he made good money. It was funny because he had a paid-for house. He paid $175,000 for the house, and he never drove a brand new car, right? Never got the newest and hottest car, but always had a nice car. And anyway, it was just really interesting. He just kind of never really put himself in a situation where debt was an issue. He rarely ever paid interest, right? Maybe he had a credit card here or there that had a few $100s on it, but never anything substantial. And it was crazy. He came in ready to retire. And when you look at all of his different assets and accounts, he had like $2.6 million of assets put away between 401ks and IRAs and different investment accounts and stuff, right? And to me, it was just so interesting because it was a guy that never made a ton of money. He never made $300,000 or $400,000 a year. He just made a decent amount of money and never really lived outside his means, never got himself in a hole, and just put his money away and did some good investments. Nothing that made him a millionaire overnight, but it was something where that slow and steady race, right, where he was putting his money in a good spot and really never having to get himself in that position where he didn't have any wiggle room monthly because of these huge overheads and debts on cars and different types of things that way. So I have seen that happen time and time again. I give you guys classic examples of that where people that just don't go outside their means or don't have huge interest payments to make. It is amazing how when you get your money to work for you, how much difference it can make over a period of time.
Yeah. That's a very disciplined person for sure. And I'm sure he's really glad, looking back on it.
It worked out.
How about someone who used debt to help them create wealth?
Yeah, I've seen this a lot. And typically, you see a lot of these ads on TV or whatnot and about, leverage your money or borrow this and do that, and the good debt and bad debt, all this different things. But there's a lot of stuff out there where, like, for example, someone that I know that helped create wealth using debt was I have a real estate client of ours who he has some accounts with us, but he's very, very heavily into real estate. And it was interesting because in real estate, a lot of them use leverage, right? So a lot of them will use debt. They'll borrow money at a cheaper interest rate. Maybe they'll get, in the old days here a few months back, right? 2% or 3% or maybe 5% or whatever it is. And they're betting that on that investment, they could then leverage that money to make more than that interest rate and make it worth the cost of borrowing. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe they do it once, then they do it twice, then they do it 3 or 4 times, then maybe they do it 10 times. And this specific client ended up having about 4 or 5 big commercial properties that he had bought in like apartment complexes and commercial buildings and things of that sort, where it ended up being extremely lucrative, where he did very, very well by using that debt to create that leverage to keep it going. And it really paid off for him. But I always like to use that in quotation marks, right? I've seen a lot of people do that, and it does not work out for them because, real estate's not a for sure thing either. And so when you're doing stuff like that, you just got to make sure it's putting yourself in a risk that you're willing to take. And again, obviously make sure the risk is versus the reward.
We're talking about handling debt in different ways on today's show, The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. And Logan, some people refer to good debt and bad debt. Take a moment, if you would, and explain the difference.
Yeah, that is a good point you brought up there, Ron, because there is a difference, right? I always say simple ways to put it. Buying something that you're putting something of your money into something that you feel is an asset, right? And I feel like when you look at an asset, again, commercial buildings, houses, apartment complexes, investments, right? Something that has a return on it over a period of time or has a proven return on it over a period of time is typically where you're going to borrow money or get it into debt to buy that property, right? If I'm buying a house, maybe I have $200,000 of my own money, but I'm going to borrow $300 to buy that $500,000 house, right? So I'm thinking that the leverage I'm going to get on that interest rate, let's say it's 4%, I'm thinking that I can get more than that 4% return on that money over a period of time. That might be considered a good debt, right? Not all the time, but sometimes when you're buying assets or you're using debt to buy an asset is typically where a lot of people would categorize as a good debt. Now, what is a bad debt? That should be very simple, but some of us, they get caught in these whirlwinds where we can't see ourselves out of the storm. Typically, a bad debt is cars, jewelry, clothes, credit cards, stuff like that. You're never really making money on that. I know some people can buy Michael Jordan sneakers and sell them and make money. That's a different case, but most people are buying them and wearing them, right? Not as an investment. So we see this all the time where some people, I'm making a lot of money off my credit card points or this or that or the other, but you still have 10 grand on your credit card that you're paying 26% interest on. So I would think the bank is still doing okay, right? So, there's definitely a difference between the good debt and bad debt. And you want to make sure, again, before getting into debt at all, you want to make sure you recognize, is it going to be a good debt or a bad debt, not just going down that wormhole of student loans, car loans, buying the new house you can't afford, all of that stuff, and making sure, again, that you're justifying whether this is going to be a good debt or a bad debt.
Okay, here's a question that a lot of people have, and a lot of people wrestle with this and wonder about the implications of having debt when you go into retirement. Does somebody need to be debt-free before they retire?
That's a really good question, and I would say not necessarily, because I have had some clients where they maybe still had a mortgage on their home or had a little bit on credit cards or whatever the case was, and they were still able to retire and have a very, very successful retirement. What I think it comes down to is really, what is your income going to look like in retirement? Because I've had some clients where maybe they make $200,000 or $300,000 a year while they're working, and now all of a sudden when they go into retirement, they're going to have $70,000 or $60,000 a year in retirement. That's a huge, huge pay cut, right? Yeah. So they might not be able to afford that huge mortgage they have on that house, and they might not be willing to downsize. So that means that we might have to really try to get as debt-free as we can in retirement, because we know that our income is going to take a significant drop when we retire. Those are a lot of the conversations we'll have if we have other debts out there, like whether it's, big car loans or RVs and toy haulers, toys like that. I've seen a lot of the times where people have those going into retirement sometimes. And again, it can be very crucial where it could really cripple your monthly budget. Or if you're going into retirement and your income is going to be pretty close to what you're making now, and you're going to be able to justify and make those payments without really making a huge stranglehold on your budget, then it makes sense where you don't have to necessarily pay those off going into retirement. But I would say, as we always say, I think financial planning is so customized and very personal to what your situation is, and that answer really just depends, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can't retire if you have a little bit of debt, depending on the situation.
Logan, I know that you work with a lot of different folks in a lot of different scenarios over the years at Regary Financial, and debt is something that is a big part of the conversation oftentimes. Tell us about a time when you helped someone put a retirement plan together, which also helped them become debt-free in the process.
Yeah, it's funny. I have one specific client I'm thinking of off the top of my head, which was always a fun one, but obviously more than that. But it was this client up in Northern California. It was very interesting. He came to us, and this is a couple of years ago now, and he really didn't have, he had, I would call good debt. Meaning he had debt on a house that was a rental property. This guy actually owned 3 rental houses as well as he had a primary home. So the 3 assets he had, he was using them as income, as well as he put away around $800,000 or $900,000 of 401ks and IRAs and cash accounts, right? So he had done a very good job of putting himself in a situation. All of his houses were paid for except for one of the rental houses. He owed about $175,000 on it. And, he was saying, okay, I want to invest my money. I want to do this, that, and the other thing with the other, close to $1 million that he had in cash and IRAs and things of that sort. And it was very interesting because by looking at all of his financials, and I always ask for let me see what your loans are. Let me see what everything is. Again, when we're doing our full comprehensive review, we look really deeply into everything when we're putting our plans together. And it was very interesting because one of his kind of goals was, man, I'd really like to pay off that house. Something where if something happened to me, I just had the idea of leaving behind some of those houses to the kids, and then I'm debt free. He doesn't owe any money to anybody. He has no car loans or nothing currently. It was kind of like a little peace of mind thing for him and his wife, which again, could totally understand. And it was funny when able to look at that, he actually had some cash money that was tax free to him. And it was crazy. So by paying off that $175,000 to that house that he had about a 4% loan on, he was able to create an extra $3,000 per month in income now from that house net. Wow. Right? Because now he's not paying a mortgage on that house. So it actually freed up some income for him in retirement as well as getting rid of that debt. So it was crazy because by just giving up a little bit of money, he was able to recoup it, over the next few years pretty fastly, as well as getting that extra income in retirement and knowing that if he passed away, that again, his goal of leaving those 3 houses behind to the kids debt-free was done. So, there's a lot of different ways you can kind of characterize that and look at these different scenarios. But if you're one of those clients that maybe has some debt and you're heading into retirement and you have some assets to work with, there definitely could be some ways where maybe we could position that to not hurt you as much as you might think going into retirement.
Wow, I'm telling you, there are so many things that you have learned over the years in dealing with different folks in different situations, and I know that you have benefited from all those as well as your clients who benefited from all of those situations, and you have a lot of accumulated wisdom to pass along to folks. If you'd like to have a conversation with Logan Sadler, here's a number you can call, 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN. Logan is the Vice President, Chief Investment Officer at Regari Financial, 2 convenient locations. Offices in Hemet and Redlands, and wherever you are in Southern California. We really appreciate your listening to the show today. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call if you'd like to arrange a discovery meeting. It's just that easy. Call that number today, leave your name, phone number, you'll get a call back, and then before you know it, you'll be in a conversation with Logan, kind of a getting to know you session. Again, no cost, no obligation. 888-823-PLAN. You're listening to the Financial Beat. Ron Stutz here along with Logan Sadler. There's more on the other side of this timeout.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of a plan that has some serious issues. Much better. That's the sound of a plan that was created by someone listening to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. So which sound is your financial plan making?
And the beat goes on, ladies and gentlemen. The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, Vice President, Chief Investment Officer at Regari Financial. Logan not only has this radio show, but has podcasts that are available and also has his own YouTube channel. And let me ask you about the YouTube videos you have, Logan. How do folks access those and what kind of material is on there?
Yeah, great question, Ron. Typically, you just head over to YouTube and type in The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, and it'll take you right to our YouTube channel where actually there's tons of videos that are uploaded on there, and actually we put new ones on there weekly. So you can head over there. There's a lot of them on maybe how to evaluate your risk in retirement. Maybe you're selling highly appreciated assets like real estate and looking for some tax strategies there. Or maybe you're just looking at what the difference is between a mutual fund or an ETF. So there's really a whole bunch of different stuff out there, really across the retirement planning spectrum for you to go check out at your convenience. Again, head over to The Financial Beat on YouTube.
And a very important phone number that I should pass along to you is 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN. That number will put you in touch with Gary Financial and can allow you to have a discovery meeting. That's how it starts with that phone call, 888-823-PLAN. A discovery meeting is kind of a getting-to-know-you session. Logan will be glad to talk to you about your situation, and it's not going to cost you anything and not going to obligate you to do anything at all beyond that. Logan's number, one more time, 888-823-PLAN. Hey, Logan, I've got a crime of the week. You know, sometimes we talk about federal crimes that are on the books, and there's some crazy stuff out there, some really outlandish things, and we always say that, you know, the darn crime wouldn't be there to begin with if somebody hadn't tried to do it, you know, before.
Yep.
So, and they want to make sure that nobody does it again. Well, we're always looking out for our listeners, and we try to make you aware of one federal crime every week to reduce the chances of you ending up in some kind of a sticky situation on the wrong side of the law.
That's for sure.
This one today is not so outlandish. Do you realize it's a federal crime to sell sparklers without warning people not to touch the glowing wire?
You'd think it's like kindergarten, right? I mean, that typically if it's glowing, it means it's hot, right? Or you don't want to touch it. So that is quite funny that it has to be on there. And I was not aware it was a federal crime.
Well, I guess, you know, that's really important around July the 4th when people are celebrating our country's independence and all that kind of thing. But also important to point that out to folks and talk about sparklers a little bit because, you know, there's such a propensity to have fires in certain spots in California.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely in California, we've had our fair share of fires this last few years, that's for sure. So don't want any more of those if we could help it.
Those happen often, unfortunately. And
too often.
My next question to you is, how often have you seen certain things happen? Frequently, rarely, or not once in your entire career? How often does someone come to you wanting to know when they will be in good financial shape to be able to retire? And the answer you get them is tomorrow. How often does that happen?
You know what? This actually does happen, I would say, frequently. Not every day, but it does happen quite often because it's funny. I could think of a few different clients off the top of my head that have actually recently came on board as well. And I know I'm actually working with a radio listener right now where we're going through the process, and it was interesting because he was getting ready to retire. His goal was by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And obviously we're later in the year, so it's we're talking pretty much the next month or so. And looking at what his situation is and how much income he's going to need, he was hoping for right around $100,000 or so a year in retirement. And by looking at his pension and being able to take a lump sum option, as well as looking at some of the other assets he has accumulated, it's going to be, he'll be in great shape and well on his way to be able to, produce that income or more in his case. And I have seen that happen from time to time. And a lot of it is because you don't know what you don't know, right? So a lot of the times we have no idea what assets we have or what we're looking to do with them until it becomes time where we don't necessarily know if we want to work anymore, right? And that's when a lot of people will make the call, come in, sit down, and we'll go over it. And in a lot of these cases, people have done very well over the last few years, accumulating wealth with a great market run, and as well as them doing the work and putting the money away. And you'd be surprised how often that people are typically in a better situation than they had thought. Now, obviously, there's some where they're not in such a great situation and they're not retiring tomorrow, right? But it does happen, and I would say it really is a great feeling to help those clients achieve that, as well as to make them, to give them that peace of mind and that comfort knowing that, listen, you could pull the plug tomorrow if you wanted to, or you can keep working. That answer is definitely up to whatever your body and whatever your mind are telling you.
There are some folks out there listening to the show right now who might be able to come into your office tomorrow and you could say, hey, you could have retired 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they're going to wish they had called you sooner.
It's true. We have some clients where I'm like, I have a lady I'm thinking of that came in on, I think she came on about a year ago or 2 years ago. And it was quite funny because I'm like, looking at everything, looking at, her balance sheet, looking at her income, looking at what she needs, looking at her assets. And I was like, why are you still working? She's like, well, I don't know, I guess because I thought I had to. And it's like, well, are you aware you could actually make more money right now if you retired and with the incomes you have and the assets you put away? It's like, no, I had no idea about that. I was like, well, if you want to work, great, continue to work. If not, you're ready to pull the plug.
Yeah, a lot of people out there going through, hard work every day and stress and everything else, and they don't really have to be. They can find out some information about that by having a conversation with you. How often do you tell people what they need to do, but you can just tell by looking in their eyes, you can tell when you're talking to them that they're not actually going to do any of it?
That does happen for sure. I would say not frequently, but rarely. Meaning it does happen, but not every day as well. But yeah, you could tell right away. I could see the clients because I always give them a little bit of homework, whether it's, hey, you got to gather up your statements or get me a copy of your trust or I need your tax return. And you can kind of tell how on top of it people are. And I get it. A lot of the times why they're coming to us is because maybe they've accumulated assets, they put away money, and they're getting to a stage of their life where they're trying to get that stuff together. So we're very considerate, knowing that, hey, I understand you don't have every single piece of your life sitting right in front of you, right? But hey, get that back together, get it for us for the next meeting or before the next meeting. That way we could review it properly or have it reviewed. And you could tell right away if they're on top of it or not. And typically what that means is that they're probably not going to follow a lot of what their advice is going to be, in the end. And I'll tell people that could be maybe it's getting your taxes done or doing a more tax efficient strategy. Maybe it's reducing your risk because you're too aggressive and they say, I know. Maybe it's the trust. Maybe they don't have a trust in place and they really need one, because they have assets and certain things they need to protect for their family's sake. And you could tell right away, typically by the conversation, if someone's going to do it or not. Nobody likes to say, no, I'm not going to do that. They typically say, yeah, that sounds good. And then they don't do it, right? I always tell our clients that when they come on board with us, Ron, once they decide to definitely, to come aboard our family, I always tell them, listen, our job is not just to say yes to everything and just to be happy you wanted to be our client. You're hiring us to do a job, right? And so I'll tell them, hey, if we need a trust in play, every time I see them, every time I talk to them, I'm going to say, hey, have you got your trust done yet? Or, hey, have you reviewed your last year's tax return with the new CPA? Or, hey, it's important that a lot of people think that all financial advisors do is tell them to buy or sell a stock or sell an annuity. But I think a lot of that other stuff is just as important to making sure that we're kind of that financial quarterback to get everything that needs to be done and making sure that we're keeping you, on your toes and keeping you not in check, but keeping you on track to get those things done.
Absolutely. And at Regary Financial, they always take a look at things in a comprehensive way. And that's what Logan Sadler spends his time doing, looking at all aspects of your financial life. And I know that sometimes, when you're dealing with money and you're dealing with, legacy and all kinds of things, divorces, death of a spouse, that kind of thing, that things can get really emotional. How often does a client or a prospective client actually cry during a visit with you?
That actually is a really good question. It really just depends, but I would say rarely. But it does happen, and sometimes more than others. And like you said, not because I'm mean or I yell or anything like that. Most of the time, it's just because when they're coming in here, they're dealing with a lot. I always tell people when we hire a new person to come work for our firm, whether it's a receptionist, back office, marketing, whatever it is, I always tell them that, you got to understand that a lot of the times when people are coming on board with our firm or when they're calling in, we have no idea what they're going through, right? It could be a death of a spouse. It could be maybe they just got a sickness. Maybe they just got to, announce that one of their family members has cancer or, you have no idea what it is. And so I always tell people we deal with a lot of people during a very, very hard times of their lives, whether it's losing loved ones or, inheriting money from a loved one, or there's just so many different things where there can be such great times in this business with clients, and there's also some very sad times where they're going through a tough time. And that's, hey, I always tell them, if you got to shed a few tears, go for it. I mean, no need to hold it back. We got Kleenex here if you need it, and then we can get that emotional side done, and then move on to what we need to cover. But it's so important to understand that this is a very touchy business, meaning where, like I always say, where you're trusting somebody with not only your money, but also with your family. And so we hold that very close to our heart and make sure we're doing the right thing and being able to allow people to grieve or deal with things how they need to.
I think that's a good lesson in life as well. I used to get really irritated when, for example, walking down the street, you meet somebody on the sidewalk and you say hello or smile at them or whatever, and they completely ignore you or just look at you like you've got three heads, that kind of thing. But, over the years, I finally realized that, you never know what that person's going through. They could have just lost a spouse or, their mother just died or whatever the case may be. So, that's really good advice, Logan. No question about that.
Well, every once in a while I give some good advice. So,
well, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then.
Exactly.
That's what I like to say. Well, you're listening to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler of Brig Area Financial. He's the VP and Chief Investment Officer. And the number to call if you'd like to have a discovery meeting with Logan, which means getting to know you session, no cost, no obligation, 888-823-PLAN. Logan, how often do you see people come into large sums of money that they weren't remotely expecting, like a big inheritance or a big commission check or some kind of bonus or a settlement from a lawsuit or whatever? How often does that happen?
You know what? I would say frequently. It does happen pretty often right now. And whether it's, like you said, big, I have a couple stories I could actually tell on each of those things where more than a couple. But, really, I mean, it's something where a lot of people have accumulated a lot of wealth, whether it's in real estate, whether it's stocks, whatever it is, right? And so a lot of them are getting older and passing away. So we're seeing inheritance right now where, there used to be people inherited, $50,000 or $100,000. Now it's like a house is, $500,000, right? So we're seeing just crazy amounts of money being inherited. And the thing that I think would make a lot of people happy is that, meaning that the people that are leaving behind the assets, a lot of the times these people are doing the right thing with the money. They're trying to seek advice, trying to do the responsible thing, whether that's invest it or pay off debt or whatever it is. But it is interesting to see. And I have a group of younger clients I'm working with that just inherited some money, and each of them got a pretty, I would say a pretty substantial chunk of change. They each got around, give or take, right around $700,000 between the three of them. So mom and dad left behind a pretty good chunk of money, and all of them are doing the responsible thing. All of them are actually still clients of ours, and we're able to kind of guide them through that and work with them just like we did with their parents. And it is one of those things where it is, pretty awesome to see them do the right things with the money and be responsible. And that's something where we help people all the time where they're inheriting money or coming into money, and they're trying to do the responsible thing and do the due diligence that's needed to to deal with that type of not burden, but really it's it can be a heavy weight for some people. And I have one other client, Ron. It was a funny story. He went from making decent money. He owned a company, and they did some stuff in the construction industry. And he made good money. He never was poor by any means, but he made good money. And all of a sudden, I remember he called me and he goes, "Hey, Logan, I need to get together with you, or do you have a tax person that you work with? I think you've mentioned that before." I said, "Yeah, I do." And so anyway, I said, "What's going on? Everything okay?" He goes, "Well, yeah." He goes, I made a lot of money this year."
Yeah.
And I go, "Really? Like, what are you thinking? Like a little bit more than last year?" He's like, "No, like, after everything was paid and all that, I got like over, he's got like $2 million left in the company from last year's earnings." And it was like, holy cow, right? That's a big difference. He's normally ending with, $100,000 to $200,000 to pay himself. And now he's got $2 million, right? So it was like one of those things where it's like, okay, obviously had some big jobs go through and have to really restructure.
Really?
So it's so important to make sure you're seeking the right advice and working with people that obviously can get you through those, so that way you can maximize that position that you're currently in.
One more question I wanted to ask you here about how often, and this is something that we've talked about numerous times before. A lot of people out there think there's a magical number that you get to, and then you can retire. And a lot of people say, I've always heard that you have to have at least $1 million to be able to retire. And, I can't even remember the number of times we've talked about how that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, definitely. This happens very frequently. And it was funny. I was actually meeting with a client the other day, and they were like, well, we want to come on board with your firm, but we don't know, we don't think we'll be able to retire. We only have $500,000 saved, right? And I said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be able to retire. That's still a good chunk of change, right? Just depending on what your situation is and what you're trying to do with it. And well, yeah, in their situation, they had 2 really good pensions. They had a very, low key lifestyle. They didn't spend a lot of money, and with what they needed, they were that money they had put away was more than sufficient. They had a paid for home, they had a rental home, right? I mean, they had all these different things where it just made this situation to where they really didn't have to have anywhere close to that $1 million. So it really does just depend on what your situation is and really what you're trying to kind of carve out as far as what your goals and expectations are for retirement. But that is one we hear all the time, Ron, right? Where I heard you got to have $1 million, and I always tell people that I always say, maybe we have not seen it all, because I always say when I think I've seen it all, somebody else comes in with something that I probably haven't seen. But we have seen just about everything. And, our firm's been open for over 25 years here. So our team has a lot of different experiences in different areas, and seeing people that have inherited significant amounts of money. Maybe they've, fell into some high earning jobs or whatever the case may be. We've seen just about everything. And if you're one of those people that maybe just inherited money or are going through a place in your life where you're making more than you used to and you're trying to find a way to maximize it, or maybe if you're getting ready to retire or just getting started on that retirement plan, maybe it's time to give us a call. And like I said, I haven't seen it all, but chances are I've probably seen something very similar to your situation and have helped families just like yourself get through that. So if you're looking for a financial advisor that specializes in retirement and pre-retirement planning to get you on track for retirement, to get you to and through, give us a call. We'd love to sit down and spend an hour with you at one of our discovery meetings.
888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN. As Logan says, he's seen just about every kind of scenario there is. And certainly, when you're planning for retirement, normally you only do, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you only do it one time. Well, why not get connected with someone who's done it hundreds and hundreds of times? Logan Sadler at Regari Financial. And Logan works with all 3 generations of some of the client families. Many clients have been with the firm for more than a quarter of a century, well over that period of time. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call right now. Leave a message with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back, and you can have a discovery meeting that we talk about so often. It is kind of a quick getting to know you session. It's not going to cost you anything. There's no obligation involved at all. 888-823-PLAN. Logan Sadler with Regari Financial. They have terrific partnerships with local CPAs, attorneys, real estate agents, mortgage lenders, Medicare specialists, all of those folks involved in your financial life to help offer well-rounded guidance in all things financial for clients. A discovery meeting, no cost. 888-823-PLAN. This is Ron Stutz along with Logan Sadler. Always fun to be on this radio show every week with Logan. We'll be right back with more in just a moment.
You're listening to The Financial Beat, striking the right chords in your financial plan.
Welcome back to more of The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. The beat goes on, as they say. Logan is the Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at Regari Financial. 2 convenient offices, Redlands and Hemet. And we appreciate your listening to the radio show today. Logan has podcasts that are available. Also, his own YouTube channel with a variety of videos. But it all started with this radio show here. And Logan has great partnerships with local CPAs, attorneys, real estate agents, mortgage lenders, Medicare specialists to help offer well-rounded guidance in all things financial for clients. You can get a discovery meeting at no cost whatsoever and no obligation by calling 888-823-PLAN. That is 888-823-PLAN. Hey, let's go to the mailbag, Logan, because we have some great questions, as usual. And first question is today from Julie in Redlands. And Julie says, Logan, I'm planning to retire in about 6 months. I've never had a household budget before, but do I need to start budgeting before I go on a fixed income?
Great question, Julie. Thanks for writing in. And yes, that is a like I said earlier, a great question to ask. And that's one of the first things we do with our clients that are getting ready to retire is ask them monthly budget or what is your outgoing expenses for the month to cover what you need to support the lifestyle you want to live, right? Maybe whatever your current lifestyle is. So that all starts with the budget. And when I say that doesn't necessarily mean me putting you on a budget or you putting yourself on a budget. But if you have no idea what your bills and expenses are, I mean, to a T, right? Meaning what your gas, electric, car payments, mortgage, whatever, everything all in there, as well as what you spend on food and all that stuff. You really want to have an idea of what your outgoing is before you retire, because how are you going to know if that fixed income is going to be able to support your desired lifestyle, right? So definitely yes on that one, Julie. Definitely recommend that. As well as when we meet with clients, we have a pre-made budget one that we actually, as a spreadsheet, will actually give out to the clients to fill out, so that way they have an idea of where their money's going. But yeah, 100%, Julie, great question. I would definitely get on that. And if you need that spreadsheet, just go ahead and give us a call. I'll be happy to send that over to you.
And Julie, once again, that number is 888-823-PLAN. 888-823-PLAN. Next question here is from Tim, and Tim is in Oceanside. Tim says, are ETFs always better than mutual funds since the fees are lower? And for the folks who might not know, what exactly are ETFs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. Good question. We have great questions already this week.
Yeah.
You can head over actually to our YouTube channel. I actually have a video I did, I think it was a few weeks back or a month or so ago. I can't remember exactly, but I did kind of the difference between the mutual funds and ETFs and what the differences are. But basically what an ETF is an exchange traded fund. So it's very similar to mutual funds, where you typically own a basket of securities, whether that's stocks, bonds, or whatever it is. To your question specifically on are they always better, I would say a lot of the time, right? Not always, but a lot of the times I do prefer ETFs over mutual funds because of the fees. Like you were saying, the cost of the mutual funds tend to be higher. I mean, I've seen some over 1%, over 1.5%, and that's not what you're paying your advisor. That is what's coming out of the internal expense of that mutual fund. When there's a lot of ETFs where if we're tracking the S&P or some of these other things that are similar to what that mutual fund's tracking, I've seen some of them be anywhere from 0.0 or a third of a percent or 0.8. I mean, super low expense ratios, under 1/4% almost all the time. So there's specific reasons we do use mutual funds for some clients, whether it's for tax purposes or whether it's for specific mutual funds that might have higher dividends or whatever the case is. But most of the time, I would say ETFs are a better fit, especially when we're looking at a client that's more concerned about cost.
Okay. Good question, Tim.
Great question.
That number is 888-823-PLAN. And Logan, we have just a couple of minutes left here, and we have one more question from Mac in Orange County. Mac says, my son just graduated from college, and his grandmother, who is my mom, gave him $10,000 as a graduation gift and told him to use it to start investing. My son asked me what he should do with it, and I'm not really sure. What should I tell him?
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, who doesn't love to start out with $10,000, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, a couple quick answers there I would give you is if you're looking for long-term retirement accounts, I would say to look at maybe putting some of that into a Roth IRA. Again, knowing that it can't touch the money till 59 and a half. It's a long-term vehicle, but it does grow tax-free. Or if you're looking for more of a shorter term just to kind of get started, they have the taxable brokerage account. So basically it means you're just buying stocks or index funds or whatever you want to buy in there. And basically, you could touch it if you had to. You just pay capital gains tax on it, on any of the gains. But I would tell them to really look at maybe some of the S&P holdings out there. There's some good S&P 500 ETFs out there that are very, very low cost and good to start out with. There's also some good bond funds and things of that sort if he's not willing to take the full risk of the S&P. But those are some good spots to start that typically are very low cost and could be a good spot, and typically less risky than buying an individual stock by buying the S&P or some of those index funds. So that's probably what I'd recommend is some good low-cost index fund that fits his risk profile.
Mac, I would recommend that you have him call Logan Sadler, or maybe the two of you can talk to Logan together.
Absolutely, yeah. We're more than happy. We cover those questions with clients all the time. That's what we're here for.
Well, I'm going to give out that number one more time here, Logan, for folks to get in touch with you. But why is it so important in this inflationary time that we're living through right now? Why is it so important to get in touch with you now?
Yeah, if you're one of those clients where you're getting ready to prepare for retirement, maybe you're a few years out, or maybe it's coming up very quick, or maybe you just retired, there's a lot going on, right? We look at inflation, you look at future of tax rates possibly going up, and you look at the state of the market. There's a lot that needs to be done when you're looking at a retirement plan on how to make sure we're doing it tax efficiently, making sure we have the right risk in our retirement, but as well as making sure our assets are producing the income that we're going to need now and possibly future incomes in the future. So that is what we do at our discovery meeting. We get together and kind of go over really what your situation is, what you do for a living, how long you're willing to keep working, or when you're wanting to retire. And then we kind of jump into what your goals and aspirations are for retirement. And then that allows us to really get to have a good feeling for who you are and what you and your family are trying to accomplish. And then what that allows us to do for our second meeting is really build out that customized plan that fits what you need to do. And again, looking at things from those different points of view, from a tax lens as well as from an investment lens, and looking at the inflationary time period we're at, and really making sure that's all factored in to your customized retirement plan. And like Ron always says, we have 2 offices, one in Hemet, California, one in Redlands. If you're out of state or farther away and you'd prefer a Zoom, we do those all the time as well. And I would be happy to jump on an hour call with you or in person and go through our complimentary discovery meeting, where we could really take a deep dive into how our firm and how myself could provide some value to you and your family heading into retirement.
Very important word that Logan just mentioned, and that is complimentary. There is no charge for this whatsoever, and there's no obligation. There's no strings attached at all. 888-823-PLAN. If you'd like to have a conversation with Logan about your situation, 888-823-PLAN. It'll all start with that discovery meeting that we mention so often, and Logan perfectly willing to sit down and talk with you and answer some of your questions and maybe give you some answers to some questions that you didn't even know you needed to ask. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call to make that happen. Hey, you've taken the first step by listening to this show. Take that next step. Call 888-823-PLAN between now and the next time we talk on the radio. Great show today, Logan. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. I felt like we had some good segments to cover. We covered a little bit about weather, a little bit about financials, as well as we had some great viewer questions this week. And I can tell you what, I'm already looking forward to next week.
Yep, me too. Join us again next time for the next edition of the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler of Regari Financial. Wherever you are in Southern California, thank you so much for listening.
The information provided is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for anyone. All information discussed is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. The views presented today are those of BD Financial Group and do not necessarily represent the views of Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult with your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Investment advisory and financial planning services are offered through Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Alpha Star and BD Financial Group are independent entities. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission, nor does it indicate that the advisor has attained a particular level of skill or ability.